Coming up on Network Africa. Protesters in Dakar banned pots in protest called for by the opposition. South Africa confirms first monkeypox case. Plus, final installment of report into alleged high-level corruption in South Africa handed to President Ramaphosa. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin in Senegal, where noise rang out across the capital Dakar overnight as people hung car horns and banged on pots and pans in an unusual form of protest organized by the political opposition ahead of legislative elections next month. The demonstration follows street protests last week that were banned by authorities and turned violent, leaving at least 3 people dead. Tensions have been growing since Senegal's highest court on June the 3rd upheld a decision to disqualify its national list of candidates for upcoming legislative elections.
Noise rang out across Senegal's capital Dakar yesterday evening as people honked car horns and banged on pots and pans in an unusual form of protest organized by the political opposition ahead of legislative elections next month. This protest was organized by Senegal's main opposition coalition, Yewi Askan We, after its candidate list for legislative elections next month was disqualified. Supporters came out to signal their anger at the president.
We are tired. We've had enough of Macky Sall. He should go.
We are tired. We are fathers. We have families to support, and we don't manage to save money. All the money we earn, we spend it. Rice is expensive. Oil is expensive. Everything is expensive. What do we have left?
The demonstration followed street protests last week that turned violent as police fired tear gas and water cannons during clashes with protesters. Several politicians were arrested, and opposition leader Ousmane Sonko says 3 people across the country were killed. Tension has run high in Senegal since major protests broke out last year after Sonko was arrested on rape charges, which he denied. Many accused Sall of trying to eliminate his competition after 2 main rivals were jailed on corruption charges in 2015 and 2018.
You see the current government. It has emptied our resources, has taken our money. Sonko's objective is to create a new Africa, a new Senegal.
We believe in Sonko. What he says reassures us. We need to help him become the next president. Personally, I like him.
The coalition's candidate list was disqualified from the July 31 poll for technical reasons, according to a court ruling. Many accused President Macky Sall of trying to eliminate his competition after 2 main rivals were killed on corruption charges in 2015 and 2018. Sall was swept to power in 2012 on a wave of popular support, which has long since soured. His 2 terms will be up in 2024, and some opponents fear he will try to run for a 3rd, an option Sall has neither confirmed nor denied.
Journalist Anika Hammerschlag joins us from Dakar. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So speak to us about last night's unusual protest, the turnout, and the reactions it's getting from across the country.
Yes, it was a beautiful protest. Started at 8 p.m. People went out into the streets, to the balconies, their windows, banging pots and pans, cars were honking. It went on for about 10 minutes, and it happened all over Dakar in every neighborhood. And people made a lot of noise. they made their voices heard. People here are not happy with the current administration. I covered the protests last week and people were chanting, Macky Sall is a dictator. And speaking with people today, they seem happy with how last night's protest went. They feel like they got their message across. And it shows Senegal is not ready to give up on democracy.
And, you know, Usman Sonko has called for more demonstrations on June the 29th. Considering the government ban on protests and clashes at last week's demonstration, leaving about 3 people dead, is this likely to go ahead as planned?
Yeah, as you say, the last protest happened despite the ban. So if the opposition is not allowed to run in the upcoming elections, there is a strong possibility that this next protest will take place with or without authorization. Last week, the government blocked the roads leading to the site of the protest, but people still found their way. It was a bit more dispersed, I think, than what people had initially planned. But the elections are coming up on the 31st. And if the opposition is left off the ballot, they have pledged to prevent the election from happening.
And amid the tensions, there's been speculations and accusations that President Sall is trying to run for a 3rd term. Has the president said or left any clues regarding this? What are you hearing?
Yeah, he's been extremely vague. He has neither confirmed nor denied whether or not he'll run. And it's definitely contributing to the tensions that are rising throughout the country. Sonko is planning to run in 2024. And if Macky Sall refuses to step down and continues to jail the opposition, we could see these protests develop into something similar to what we saw last year, which was a lot of violence. 14 people died and there was mass looting.
All right, then, Hanika Hamishlag, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And over in North Africa, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has expressed support for a controversial economic reform program being implemented by the government of Tunisia. The country is facing a severe economic crisis and is asking for a $4 billion loan. Jihad Azor, the IMF's Middle East director, after meeting President Kais Saied in Tunis, says he likes the reform plan and that the IMF is ready to discuss a loan. The plan includes freezing wages, stopping recruitment in the public sector, and cutting energy and food subsidies. But there have been big protests, and Tunisia's powerful trade union movement has called for nationwide strikes. The president has already suspended parliament and sacked his entire cabinet. He says he needs even more powers to better steer the country. His opponents say that amounts to a coup against democracy. According to the United Nations, violence in Western Sudan this month alone has displaced more than 84,000 people, doubling the number of those driven from their homes so far this year. The numbers are the highest since January 2021. Last year, at least 440,000 were displaced, 5 times more than in 2020, according to the United Nations data. Aid workers fear a displacement crisis similar to the one triggered by the conflict in Darfur in the early 2000s. Violence escalated there after 2003 as Sudan's government, allied with so-called Janjaweed Arab militias, moved to put down a rebellion by armed groups. At least 2.5 million people were displaced and 300,000 were killed. To health matters, Ghana's lawmakers have approved a plan to investigate how funds worth $1.5 billion were spent in the fight against COVID-19. It follows alleged discrepancies in receipts and payments presented to MPs by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. Opposition MPs accused the minister of failing to give a convincing explanation when he appeared before Parliament on Wednesday. But the minister says the government has been accountable and transparent in the use of the funds. However, Parliament Speaker Alban Bagbin ordered the parliamentary committees on finance and health to investigate the management of the funds. And over in South Africa, the final part of a report into alleged corruption in the country under former President Jacob Zuma has been handed to his successor, Cyril Ramaphosa. The report by Judge Raymond Zondo is more than 5,000 pages long. It paints a picture of a country whose coffers were looted by its former president and his associates, the prominent Gupta brothers.
The Zondo Commission was set up in 2018 to probe allegations of high-level graft during Zuma's 9-year tenure.
We have made some contribution towards the resolution of issues of corruption in our country and state capture. Thank you.
Mr. Zuma is suspected of colluding with businessmen close to him, the Gupta brothers, to plunder state resources. They deny all allegations. The report published on Wednesday says President Cyril Ramaphosa told the commission he had no first-hand knowledge of any wrongdoing, only media reports. But as deputy president for 4 years under Zuma, the commission says Ramaphosa should have done more towards making his own inquiries. The president received the report from senior judge Raymond Zondo at the Union Buildings in Pretoria.
The formal handover today of this final report represents the fulfillment of the remedial action that was set out in the State of Capture report as issued by the then public protector. The report is far more than a record of widespread corruption, fraud, and abuse. It is also an instrument through which the country can work to ensure that such events, such as state capture, never ever happen again in our country.
On receiving the report, the president said the government would come up with an implementation plan for the commission's proposals within 4 months.
We have come to understand what happened, who was involved, and we've also come to understand the effect that state capture had on our state, on our economy, as well as on our society.
The commission's report is a culmination of 3 years of hearings involving some 300 witnesses, including Ramaphosa himself. And it comes at an awkward time. Police are investigating money laundering allegations against the president after millions of dollars were allegedly stolen from his farm. He's welcomed the inquiry. Ramaphosa also faces a divided party ahead of this year's African National Congress elective conference. It will decide whether to give him a second run at president in elections expected for 2024.
And still in South Africa, the country has confirmed its first case of monkeypox. It's the second non-endemic country in Africa after Morocco to do so. The Minister of Health, Joe Phalam, who made the announcement at a media briefing, confirmed that the case identified involves a 30-year-old man residing in the Gauteng province with no recent travel history.
Many of us have known that there's been a lot of spoken about monkeypox, which is spreading in various parts of the world. Late yesterday, I received a report from the National Health Laboratory Service indicating that they have confirmed through a laboratory tests the first case of monkeypox in South Africa. The patient is a 30-year-old male from Johannesburg who has no travel history, meaning that it cannot be attributed to the disease having been acquired elsewhere. So it means that it is with us. So working with the relevant health authorities, a process of contact tracing started to trace the close contacts of this gentleman. Monkeypox is usually a very mild disease, manifesting as blisters on the skin. It is usually mild and self-limiting, with a very limited fatality rate of about 1%. The disease has previously been reported in African countries such as Nigeria, DRC, Central African Republic, and Ghana in the early 2000s. The current outbreak is dominated by high numbers in Europe The UK is currently leading just over 700 cases, Spain just over 500, Germany, Portugal, and France. Cases have also been reported, in both cases just below 200 in the US and also in Canada.
Still to come on the programme. UK Prime Minister says he will defend Rwanda asylum deal to Prince Charles as he attends the Commonwealth Summit in Kigali. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. It's not news that South Africa and most of Africa say they are taking a stance of neutrality on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This war has, of course, come with implications for the continent. Like the rest of the world, food insecurity is one of them. Channels Television South Africa Bureau Chief Betty Dibia spoke to the Ukrainian ambassador to South Africa, who says her country still counts on Africa to support efforts to stop the war, given the ties that date way back to the days of the Soviet Union's liberation support.
The African reaction and approach is very important. It is 54 countries that are not expressing their view in single voice. And we've seen this split of opinions during the vote in the United Nations. And we see the dependence of some of the governments on the Russian decision makers. But I think that the address of the president of Ukraine, the recent one to the Board of African Union, was important to be heard by every single country, whatever level of representation was at that platform at that time. And I believe that this is a kind of lakmus paper today for a lot of African democracies to show their real adherence to the values that they were suffering through in their histories, to show and prove to their population that those values that they are declaring during their elections or preparation to the elections, that they are fair and true.
Meanwhile, World Bank Group President David Malpass and the administrator of the United States Agency for International Development, Samantha Power, have highlighted the importance of responding to the interlocking crisis facing developing countries, including through support to countries facing a food crisis. They made the statement while announcing new support for East Africa as part of $30 billion of assistance in the food-related areas in addressing current challenges, including the war in Ukraine.
2009, the World Bank works on an array of development issues, and including and especially right now food and fertilizer. We've announced $30 billion of assistance in the food-related areas as part of our response to the current set of crises.
Now, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will explain the obvious merits of his country's Rwanda asylum plan to the Prince of Wales if he raises the issue when they meet. Prince Charles is reported to have called the policy appalling, but the Prime Minister has called for critics to keep an open mind. The pair are both attending a summit in the Rwandan capital, Kigali. Under the plan, people who arrive in the UK via small boats can be removed to the East African country. Critics of the scheme have raised Rwanda's human rights record and include refugee organizations, politicians, and the Church of England.
I think that, anybody who comes in, I'm delighted that all the Prince Charles and everybody is here today to see a country that is, I think, undergone a complete transformation, or a very, very substantial transformation. And
are you willing to defend the policy should he raise it?
I think that people need to keep an open mind about the policy. The critics need to keep an open mind about it. I think a lot of people can see its obvious merits. And yeah, of course, if I'm seeing the Prince tomorrow, I'm of course going to make that point.
And now let's head over to Tunisia to meet Noor Bendia, a trained architect who fell in love with drift racing after accidentally walking into a race. She's currently training for her first international competition and is the first Tunisian female drifter to take part in the event. She hopes to encourage other young women to become professional drivers. Take a look.
Clutching the wheel of a car, 27-year-old Noor Bendia floors the gas pedal and spins her car in chaotic circles. An architect by trade, Bendia says she fell in love with drift racing in 2019 when she accidentally walked into a race.
The first time I joined a car sports competition, it was 2015. It was a coincidence. I was walking by the event and heard the sound of cars, so I stopped and went to watch. It was love at first sight. It was a drift race. No matter how many races I take part in, drifting is the only thing that makes my heart beat faster.
The racer is currently training for her first international competition and will be the first female drifter from Tunisia to take part in the event. But the road getting here wasn't easy. Bendia describes facing stereotypes and disapproval from friends and family.
There is a stereotypical image of women that don't know how to drive. Whether you like it or not, in Tunisia, in the Arab world, and in the whole world, this image exists. People are shocked when I tell them that I race. When they see my posters or see me in the media, they wonder how a woman can drive and win races. How can this happen? I used to get upset by this, but now it actually makes me happy because I am breaking this stereotype. With time, people have become accepting of the idea. They say it's a great thing when they watch me.
Recently, Bendia and some friends founded Descent Diva, an all-female car drifting club. The group includes 8 members, 3 from Egypt and 5 from Tunisia. Drifting is a sport in which the driver intentionally oversteers, causing loss of traction while maintaining control of the car. The first drift competition in Tunisia was held in 2014, with men dominating the racetrack. Since then, more women like Bendia are taking the wheel and joining the competitions.
And back here in Nigeria, albinism is a rare, non-contagious, genetically inherited difference present at birth. In almost all types of albinism, both parents must carry the gene for it to be passed on, even if they do not have albinism themselves. The condition is found in both sexes, regardless of ethnicity, and in all countries of the world. Albinism results in a lack of pigmentation in the hair, skin and eyes, causing vulnerability to the sun and bright light as a result. Albinism is a condition which causes lack of pigmentation, leaving the skin and hair white. Albinos often find themselves at the receiving end of misunderstanding and stigma. This march is their statement to the world that they're as human as the next person and are prepared to fight discrimination.
So there's a lot of myth about people with albinism. They believe they are spirits. Some say they are, all sorts of things. But the truth is, people with albinism are just like every other people, every one of us. They are beautiful, uniquely in their own way, yes, but they are just like you and I.
On the Lagos State government's part, it says more will be done with adequate synergy by parties involved to protect albinos.
LSCTF is doing stuff. Ministry of Agric has continued to create a different means of empowerment. Ministry of Health is also supporting. There's healthcare, there's insurance for not just people with disabilities, but even the ones that have families, to expand the reach as well. So yes, a lot more can be done, but there are quite a number of things that are currently ongoing. So yeah.
Participants seem very happy that a day set aside for them is well celebrated, as they call on more people living with the pigment deficiency to protect themselves and live with dignity.
This awareness is to parents or persons living with albinism and the society to protect them from the sun, to protect them, from further damage, and for policies and organizations to recognize the best way to work with persons living with albinism, and also for schools to recognize that the child living with albinism is just as smart as the next child that is not living with albinism, but they just have to take extra care, the skin of the child.
Today is a special day for us. We create awareness for federal government, for everyone, so that all the Nigeria, we can be inclusive in any aspect in government, in government exercises.
The International Albinism Awareness Day is usually celebrated on the 13th of June every year. In Lagos State, participants are of the view that government should do more to cater for their needs. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.